Why are you
My
doing
car broke
this?
down
You
and I
can't just
knocked on
walk
the
away
wrong
now,
door for
not after
help. The
everything.
Mafia
It's too
boss
late for
refused to
us.
let me
This is
go.
the only way.
Alina gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as her old car shuddered and coughed like a dying beast. The engine wheezed one last time and died entirely, leaving her in the cold, wet night with nothing but the sound of relentless rain and distant thunder. She pressed her forehead to the steering wheel, the leather slick with water, and let out a weary sigh. Of course, she muttered, shaking her head. Of course this would happen tonight. The road stretched on ahead, twisted and lonely, flanked by black silhouettes of pine trees. There were no other cars, no lights, nothing but the storm. Her phone had died hours ago and the nearest town was miles away. Her chest tightened. The idea of being stranded here, alone, with no one to help, filled her with unease. And then, as if conjured by some strange fate, a faint light glimmered in the distance. It was small, almost lost among the rain and shadows, but it was enough to draw her attention. She squinted through the windshield, heart quickening. A mansion, tall, sprawling, and perched on a cliff, rose out of the darkness. Its windows glowed with warm light, and for a moment it seemed like a sanctuary amidst the storm. She hesitated. She had read enough fairy tales to know that lonely mansions often hid secrets, terrible ones, but desperation had a way of drowning caution. With a deep breath, she pulled the car to the side of the wet road, grabbed her soaked jacket, and stepped out. The rain immediately drenched her, turning her hair into a heavy curtain of black. Her shoes slipped in the mud, but she pressed on, toward the glowing door. The mansion loomed above her, its towering pillars and ornate windows giving it an air of ancient grandeur. Thunder rolled as she lifted her hand and knocked on the massive oak door. She knocked again, louder this time, her knuckles stinging against the cold wood. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a slow, almost theatrical creak, the door swung open. Standing in the doorway was a man unlike anyone she had ever seen. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a dark suit that seemed to absorb the shadows around him. His hair was black as midnight, slicked back perfectly, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, dark, deep, and impossible to read. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm, smooth, but carrying a subtle edge that made Alina's stomach clench. There was power in him, raw and unspoken, like a force of nature that could be gentle or devastating. My car broke down," Alina said, shivering, trying to keep her voice steady. I just need a phone or a place to wait for help, please." The man's eyes studied her, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them, the storm outside fading into insignificance. Then he stepped aside. "Come in," he said, not as a polite offer but as a command, a statement of fact. Alina hesitated. Something about him made her pulse race, not fear exactly, but a strange mixture of awe and unease. Still, the rain was relentless and the mansion's door promised warmth and shelter. She stepped inside. The interior was breathtaking. Chandeliers of crystal hung from impossibly high ceilings, casting light that danced across marble floors. The walls were lined with art and ancient tapestries, and the air smelled of rich wood, polished stone, and something faintly metallic. There was a hush here, as if the house itself was alive and listening. The man, Alina still did not know his name, led her down a long hallway. He did not speak again, and neither did she. Each step echoed softly, the sound swallowed by the grandeur of the mansion. It felt like walking through a dream, one that teetered on the edge of something dangerous. Finally, they reached a small sitting room. A fire crackled in a wide hearth, throwing shadows across the room. The man gestured for her to sit. "Warm yourself," he said simply, turning to leave. Excuse me," Alina called, hesitating. "Do you have a phone?" He stopped, half-turned. "You won't be needing it tonight," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. There was a weight in his words, an unspoken meaning she could not place. Alina frowned, her heart thudding. "I need to call someone. I don't belong here." He looked at her then, fully this time. His gaze was penetrating, like he could see straight into her thoughts, her fears, her secrets. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the place we belong is not the one we choose. It is the one that chooses us." A shiver ran down her spine. His words were unsettling, but there was an undeniable pull in them, a strange gravity that made her want to obey. And yet her instincts screamed that this man was dangerous, more dangerous than the storm outside. For hours, Alina sat by the fire. She tried to ignore him, tried to convince herself she would leave in the morning. But the man, Vincenzo, she would later learn, moved through the mansion with a presence that was both commanding and quiet. He did not speak often, but when he did, it was like the world shifted slightly. His silence was a test, his rare smiles were a trap. Alina could not stop watching him. There was something mesmerizing about the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to command the air around him. But there were shadows, too, in the lines of his face, in the depth of his eyes. She sensed the weight of a life lived with power and danger, a man who had known betrayal, blood, and loss. And yet, she also glimpsed a vulnerability, hidden but present like a candle flickering beneath a stone. Hours passed, the storm outside relentless. Lightning flashed, and Alina could not help but flinch each time. She tried to focus on the fire, on the quiet elegance of the room, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. She wanted to understand him, to know why the mansion felt alive, and why she felt like she had stumbled into a world that was not meant for her. Finally, sleep claimed her, a fitful, uneasy slumber. She dreamed of shadows that whispered her name, of hands that reached out from the darkness, and of a man whose eyes followed her through every corridor of her mind. She woke with a start to the sound of rain still hammering against the windows, the fire reduced to glowing embers. And then she realized she could not find the door. Panicked, she stood and looked around. The sitting room was empty. The mansion felt larger, more labyrinthine, as if it had shifted in the night. Footsteps echoed softly, and she turned to see him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You cannot leave yet," he said, almost gently, almost kindly. But there was steel beneath the words, an edge she could not ignore. I need to get out," Alina said, her voice trembling. "I have to go back to the road, to my life." He stepped closer, and though his movements were calm, every inch of him radiated control. "Some doors," he said, his voice low and hypnotic, "once opened, cannot be closed." Alina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. She realized then that she had stumbled into something far larger than a broken-down car, far more dangerous than a simple stormy night. This mansion, this man, held secrets that could consume her. And yet, there was a pull she could not resist, a magnetism that threatened to undo the careful boundaries she had built around her heart. As the morning light began to creep through the high windows, Alina made a decision. She would stay, for now, because the storm outside was too fierce, because the mansion held a strange allure, and because she could not ignore the pull of the man who had refused to let her leave. And in that moment, she understood the first truth of the mansion and the man who ruled it. Sometimes, the wrong door can lead you exactly where you are meant to be, even if the journey is shadowed, dangerous, and uncertain. Cliffhanger, Alina steps into the day, but the gates remain closed. She is trapped in a world of elegance, power, and shadow, and she cannot tell if her captor is a monster, a savior, or something in between. As Vincenzo watches her from the shadows, a subtle smile touches his lips, a promise that her life and her heart will never be the same again. Morning light filtered through the tall, ornate windows, casting long, golden stripes across the marble floors. Yet the mansion did not feel brighter. The shadows seemed deeper here, curling in corners as if hiding secrets. Alina walked slowly down the hall, her shoes echoing softly. Each step made her heart beat faster. The house felt alive, watching her, breathing with her. She had expected Vincenzo to be stern, but not silent. He had not appeared since dawn, leaving her alone to explore the mansion's labyrinthine halls. The walls were lined with portraits of men and women whose eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. Some looked proud, others fearful. She shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of generations staring down at her. Elena paused before a large portrait of a man whose eyes resembled Vincenzo's. His face was noble but hard, with a shadow of sorrow etched into every line. She sensed that this was more than a simple painting. It was history, legacy, a reminder of power and loss. A sudden sound, a soft click, made her spin. A hidden door had opened, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Hesitation rooted her to the spot. Should she explore or leave it alone? Her curiosity, as always, won. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, letting the unknown pull her downward. The staircase led to a dimly lit chamber, lined with shelves filled with ancient books, scrolls, and curious artifacts. The air smelled of old paper, stone, and something metallic, faint but persistent. Candles flickered along the walls, though no one had lit them. They burned with a steady, unearthly flame, casting dancing shadows across the room. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She picked up a dusty book, its cover cracked, pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully. Symbols and drawings of strange creatures, shadows, and sigils filled the pages. Her pulse quickened. The mansion was not only a home, it was a place of power. Secrets of long-dead ancestors and hidden forces were stored here. A sudden sound made her freeze. The staircase above groaned as if someone was descending. She quickly closed the book, hiding it behind her. Vincenzo appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "You shouldn't wander here," he said, his voice low and steady, a warning wrapped in silk. I was curious," Elena admitted. "I wanted to understand this place, your house. It's strange." He descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing here," he said. "Not everything is meant to be discovered." Elena's heart thudded. "But if I don't try, I'll never understand it. I want to know what this place is, who you are." For a moment he paused, studying her. There was a flicker of something softer, almost like respect, before his usual calm returned. "Very well," he said, gesturing for her to follow him. "Then you will see, but you must be careful. This house does not forgive mistakes." He led her back up the staircase and through corridors she had never noticed before. Each room was a new revelation, a hall of weapons glinting in candlelight, a library filled with tomes older than any she had seen, a gallery of armor, each piece marked with symbols that seemed to hum with energy. Elena felt overwhelmed but also enthralled. "Why do you show me this?" she asked quietly, glancing at him. Vincenzo's gaze lingered on her, unreadable. "Because you will need to know," he said. "The mansion is not just walls and furniture. It is a living memory of my family, my power, my mistakes. You will need to understand it if you are to survive here." Survive. The word echoed in her mind. She realized she had not yet considered the possibility that she might not be able to leave. That thought sent a shiver down her spine, but curiosity outweighed fear. As the day wore on, Elena began to see more than just opulence. She saw patterns, subtle symbols carved into the walls, paintings arranged in ways that seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic. She felt that the mansion itself was alive, guiding her, warning her, testing her. Vincenzo watched her closely, a silent shadow. Sometimes he would appear unexpectedly, his presence filling a room with a quiet authority that made her pulse quicken. Other times, she would catch glimpses of him in mirrors or at the end of hallways, watching, always watching. There was a strange tension between them, a silent conversation of glances, gestures, and unspoken words. By evening, Elena had discovered a small garden courtyard, hidden from the rest of the mansion. Rainwater dripped from the leaves of twisted trees, forming puddles that reflected the flickering light from the mansion windows. She knelt by one of the fountains, listening to the gentle trickle of water, and allowed herself a moment of peace. "You find solace in water," Vincenzo said suddenly, standing behind her. She had not heard him approach. I suppose I do," she replied cautiously. "It's calming." He crouched beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You will need calm," he said, "for the trials to come. Not all storms are outside." Elena looked at him, really looked, and saw a depth of pain in his eyes she had not noticed before. Something had happened in this house, something that had shaped the man before her. She realized then that the mansion was not only a place of power, it was a place of curses, regrets, and hidden truths. Night fell, and with it, the mansion seemed to shift. Shadows stretched longer, whispers echoed through the corridors, and Elena felt a growing unease. A soft, eerie hum seemed to vibrate through the walls. She had the sense that the house was alive, reacting to her presence, testing her resolve. Vincenzo appeared beside her again. "The mansion has ways of revealing itself," he said, "and it does not forgive fear." "Fear of what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Of itself, of what it holds, of what you might become if you fail." His words were cryptic, but they carried weight. Elena felt a chill, realizing that the mansion was more than architecture. It was a reflection of power, ambition, and darkness intertwined. A sudden noise drew their attention, a soft creak, followed by a whisper. Elena turned sharply, but the corridor behind them was empty. Vincenzo's hand brushed against hers almost accidentally, and a spark of something unnameable passed between them. She pulled back slightly, startled by the intimacy, yet unable to ignore it. "You are not like the others," he said, his voice low. "You see more than you should. You feel more than you should. That is why you are here." Elena frowned. "Why me?" He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because you have courage, and courage is rare and dangerous." The mansion seemed to respond to their words. The shadows deepened, the whispers grew louder, and a cold wind blew through the courtyard, despite the closed windows. Elena felt a presence, something ancient and watching, and realized that the house was alive in ways she could not comprehend. Over the next hours, Vincenzo began to reveal small pieces of the mansion's secrets. Stories of ancestors who had wielded power beyond ordinary men, of curses that lingered like shadows, of battles fought in the darkness, both within and outside these walls. Elena listened, captivated and frightened in equal measure. She began to understand the weight he carried, the loneliness, the fear, the responsibility. Yet, despite the danger, there was an undeniable pull between them. Every glance, every brush of hands, every shared silence built tension that neither could ignore. Elena felt drawn to him, even as every instinct told her to flee. She realized that the mansion was not only testing her courage, it was testing her heart. As midnight approached, a soft, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the floors. Candles flickered violently, shadows twisted unnaturally, and Elena felt a cold presence brush past her. She turned to Vincenzo, but he was already watching, his expression tense. "The house is restless," he said quietly, "and it does not welcome outsiders easily." Elena swallowed hard. What is it?" He shook his head. "Not everything can be named, some things must be faced." Fear and fascination intertwined, and Elena realized that she was no longer just a visitor in this mansion. She was part of its story, caught between shadows and light, power and vulnerability. And Vincenzo, enigmatic, commanding, haunted, was the key to understanding it all. Cliffhanger. As the mansion's whispers grew louder and the shadows twisted unnaturally, a door at the far end of the hallway slowly creaked open on its own. Elena took a hesitant step toward it, and Vincenzo's hand shot out, gripping her arm, not to stop her but to warn her. "Do not open that door," he said, his voice a mixture of fear and authority. "Some secrets are meant to remain closed, but now you may have awakened something that cannot be ignored." The mansion seemed alive in ways Elena could never have imagined. Shadows moved with intention, corridors twisted as if reshaping themselves, and whispers echoed from walls that should have been silent. Each step she took felt like a test, every turn a challenge. Yet she could not resist exploring further, drawn by curiosity and the subtle pull of Vincenzo's presence that lingered even when he was not near. The mysterious door from the night before loomed in her mind, and she knew she could not ignore it forever. The mansion was not merely a home, it was a reflection of power, history, and hidden truths. And somewhere within its walls, a secret waited to reveal itself, one that could either destroy her or bind her to Vincenzo forever. Vincenzo appeared as she reached the hallway leading to the forbidden door. His presence was silent, like a shadow merging with the darkness. He studied her with those storm-colored eyes, intense and unwavering. "You cannot open that door," he said softly, but there was an edge of tension in his voice she had never heard before. "Why not?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the unease curling in her chest. "I need to understand this place. I need to know what I am facing." Vincenzo's gaze softened for the briefest moment, revealing a flicker of vulnerability beneath his usually commanding demeanor. "Because some truths are not gentle," he said, his words heavy with meaning. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. And the mansion, it will demand a price." Elena met his gaze, determination flaring in her chest. "I'll pay the price," she said. "I've survived storms worse than this. I can face what's inside." For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he extended his hand. "Then I will go with you, but know this. The mansion tests more than courage. It tests hearts." Together they approached the door, its surface dark and polished, almost reflective. A chill radiated from it and the air felt heavier, charged with unseen energy. Elena's hand hovered over the handle, but Vincenzo's presence beside her steadied her. He did not touch the door, only stayed close, a silent sentinel. When Elena finally opened it, a rush of cold air swept through the hallway, carrying with it whispers in a language she could not understand. The room beyond was unlike any other she had seen. Shadows pooled in corners, swirling like living ink. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. "This," Elena whispered, stepping inside, "is alive." Vincenzo's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the room. "It is," he said quietly, "and it has been waiting for you." Elena shivered, both from fear and fascination. The mansion had always been mysterious, but now its power was tangible, pressing in on her from all sides. And yet she felt a strange sense of purpose. She had been drawn here not by accident but by something greater, a force she could not name. The shadows moved closer, curling around her, and for a moment she felt herself sinking into them, swallowed by darkness. Vincenzo reached out, his hand brushing hers. The contact sent a spark through her, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold around them. "You are stronger than you realize," he said. "The mansion tests more than your courage. It tests your soul." Elena met his gaze, feeling a mix of fear and longing. She realized then that her bond with Vincenzo had shifted. It was no longer simply curiosity or fear. It was something deeper, something that entwined them in ways she could not yet define. As they moved further into the room, the shadows began to take form. Shapes emerged, phantoms of the past, echoes of the mansion's history. Faces twisted in pain, in anger, in longing. They seemed to reach for her, to pull at her very being. Elena felt herself faltering, her resolve tested in a way that went beyond physical danger. Vincenzo moved closer, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos. "Do not let them frighten you," he said. "They feed on fear. Hold your ground and they cannot touch you." Elena took a deep breath, focusing on his words. The phantoms recoiled slightly, hissing like creatures disturbed by light. She felt her confidence grow, a fire building within her. She was not just a visitor here. She was part of the mansion's story, and she would not be passive. The room seemed to respond to her determination. The shadows receded, and the glowing symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, forming patterns that were almost mesmerizing. Alina realized that the mansion was not merely testing her, it was communicating with her, revealing its secrets to those brave enough to face them. Vincenzo's gaze softened as he watched her. "You see it," he said quietly. "You understand more than I expected." "I don't understand everything," Alina admitted, "but I feel connected, like I'm part of something bigger than myself." He nodded, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "And that connection is dangerous, but it is also powerful. That is why you are here with me." Hours passed as they navigated the room together, unraveling its mysteries. Alina learned of the mansion's history, of the family's ancient power, and of the curses that lingered like shadows, waiting for the unwary. Vincenzo shared fragments of his own story, of the burdens he carried, of the loneliness that came with power. Alina listened, captivated, understanding for the first time that the man before her was not just a figure of fear, but a man shaped by loss, responsibility, and desire. As night deepened, the mansion's whispers grew louder. A sudden tremor shook the floor, and the shadows twisted violently, forming shapes more distinct and menacing than before. Alina felt herself faltering, fear clawing at her chest. Vincenzo's hand found hers again, grounding her. "Hold on," he said, his voice firm. "Do not let the fear control you. You are stronger than you think." Together they faced the phantoms, moving as one through the room. Every step, every gesture, deepened the connection between them. The tension between fear and desire, danger and trust, created a current that pulled them closer. Alina realized that her feelings for Vincenzo were no longer simple. They were a mixture of admiration, fear, longing, and something more profound, something dangerous. The room responded to their unity. The shadows receded, the symbols glowed brighter, and a warmth filled the space. For a moment, the mansion seemed to breathe with relief, as if acknowledging that they had passed its test. But the calm was fleeting. A new presence stirred in the far corner of the room, a shadow darker than the rest, moving with intent. Alina froze, sensing the weight of something ancient and malevolent. Vincenzo stepped in front of her, protective and commanding. "This is not over," he said, his voice low and serious. "The mansion has more tests, and some of them cannot be faced together. You must be ready to confront what lies ahead alone, even if I stand beside you." Alina nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had entered this world expecting danger, but now she realized that the true test was not only of courage but of the heart. She would have to trust herself, trust him, and face the darkness within the mansion, and perhaps within herself. The shadows began to stir again, whispering secrets and promises in a language she could not understand. A chill ran down her spine, and she felt the first pangs of real fear. Yet, alongside it, there was determination, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. Vincenzo's hand lingered on hers, a silent reassurance. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it, but you must know this mansion changes people, and it changes hearts. Once you step further, nothing will be the same." Alina swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words. She had already changed, in ways subtle but undeniable. Fear had mingled with fascination, curiosity with desire, and trust with caution. She realized that her journey was not merely about surviving the mansion. It was about understanding herself, and understanding the man who ruled this world of shadows and light. The mansion's whispers grew louder, the symbols on the walls pulsing faster, and the shadows twisted more violently. Alina felt a surge of courage, gripping Vincenzo's hand tightly. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. He nodded, eyes intense and unreadable. "Then step forward," he said, "and do not look back." Together they moved deeper into the room, confronting the darkness, navigating the trials the mansion laid before them. Every step, every challenge brought them closer, not just in purpose, but in something more intimate, more powerful. The bond between them grew, forged in fear, trust, and shared courage. And then, as they reached the heart of the room, a figure emerged from the shadows, a phantom, ancient and commanding with eyes like cold fire. It raised a hand, pointing directly at Alina, and the room went silent. The mansion held its breath, waiting. Cliffhanger. Vincenzo stepped in front of her, protective and commanding, but even he faltered slightly. The phantom's gaze locked on Alina, and in that moment she understood that the mansion's ultimate test had begun, and she might have to face it alone. The mansion held its breath, the shadows stretching longer and twisting unnaturally as the phantom glared at Alina. Its eyes burned with an intensity that froze the blood in her veins, yet she did not turn away. She felt Vincenzo's hand brush against hers, steadying her, grounding her. His presence was a lifeline, but even so, she understood the challenge ahead was hers to face. "You are not alone," Vincenzo whispered, his voice low, but there was a sharp edge of fear in it, rare but real. "But you must act. Do not let it see doubt." Alina nodded, drawing a deep breath. The warmth of his hand in hers gave her courage. She stepped forward, feeling the mansion's pulse beneath her feet, a living rhythm that seemed to match her own heartbeat. She could feel the centuries of history, power, and sorrow pressing down, and yet she was not afraid. She was determined. The phantom's form shifted, its shadowy tendrils reaching for her, yet Alina did not falter. She lifted her hands and, instinctively, began to recite the words she had seen in the ancient books Vincenzo had shown her. The language was strange, harsh on her tongue, but it felt natural, like it had been waiting for her to speak it. The shadows recoiled at the sound, hissing and twisting. The phantom's eyes narrowed, but Alina pressed on, each word strengthening the protective energy she felt rising from the mansion itself. Vincenzo stood close, his hand never leaving hers, a silent promise of support, yet he knew she had to channel the mansion's power herself. As she spoke the final words, a brilliant light erupted from the symbols on the walls, swirling and dancing around them. The shadows shrieked and twisted, then slowly began to dissipate, retreating into the corners. The phantom's form wavered, becoming less threatening, and finally it bowed its head, a gesture of recognition, before vanishing completely. Alina dropped to her knees, exhausted, her heart pounding with relief and awe. She had faced the mansion's ultimate test and survived. The room, once oppressive and threatening, now felt alive in a different way, vibrant, almost welcoming. Vincenzo knelt beside her, his dark eyes softer than she had ever seen. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced what no one else could. You have changed this place." Alina looked up at him, seeing not the feared Mafia boss, but the man beneath. The one shaped by pain, loneliness, and the weight of centuries of responsibility. For the first time, she understood that his power was not only in his control over the mansion or his influence in the world outside. It was in his ability to protect, to endure, and to care, even when it seemed impossible. You were afraid too, weren't you?" she asked softly. "I could see it in your eyes." He shook his head almost imperceptibly, then nodded at last. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but my fear is different. I guard what matters. I guard what I cannot bear to lose." His gaze softened as he looked at her, and for a moment the shadows and grandeur faded. It was just them, two people who had braved darkness together. Alina felt something shift within her, a bond forged in danger, trust, and shared courage. She realized that her feelings for Vincenzo had deepened beyond fascination or attraction. She cared for him, not just as a mysterious, commanding figure, but as a man who had allowed her to see the truth behind his strength and his sorrow. Vincenzo extended his hand, helping her to her feet. "You are no longer a visitor here," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You belong to this mansion, to its history, its power, and perhaps to me." Alina's breath caught in her throat. The implication was clear, yet unspoken. She had come here by accident, seeking shelter from a storm, and now she was part of something far greater, far more dangerous, and far more intimate than she could have imagined. They walked together through the mansion, the oppressive weight of shadows gone, replaced by a quiet majesty. Each room, once threatening, now felt alive with possibility. The armor gleamed, the books whispered knowledge, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. The mansion had recognized Alina's courage and had accepted her, changing its presence in response. As they reached the highest tower, Vincenzo paused, looking out over the cliffside. The storm that had brought Alina to the mansion was gone, leaving the sky clear and vast, the rising sun painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. "This view," Alina whispered, awed by the beauty of the world beyond the mansion's walls. "I never imagined it could be like this." Vincenzo's gaze followed hers, lingering on the horizon. "Few get to see it," he said softly. "Most are too afraid to climb the towers to face the darkness within themselves." Alina turned to him, a quiet question in her eyes. "And you? Were you ever afraid?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of the man who had always seemed untouchable. "Afraid, yes, always, but I learned that fear is not weakness. It is a guide. It tells you what matters. It tells you what is worth protecting." Her hand found his again, a simple, grounding gesture that spoke volumes. "Then we faced it together," she said, "and it matters both of us." Vincenzo's eyes softened and he nodded. "Yes," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Together." They stayed in the tower as the sun rose higher, the mansion around them quiet, alive with a newfound calm. Alina felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a connection to this place and to the man beside her. She realized that her journey was no longer about escaping a storm or surviving a night. She had found a purpose, a home, and a bond that transcended fear and danger. But as she looked out from the tower, a subtle tension lingered in the air, a reminder that the mansion's power was not entirely gone, that the world beyond the walls held its own challenges. The horizon stretched endlessly, beautiful yet foreboding, promising new trials and opportunities for courage, trust, and perhaps love. Vincenzo turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. "You have earned your place here, Alina. But know this, the mansion's trials never fully end. It will always test those it accepts, and we will face them together." Alina nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had faced darkness, confronted fear, and emerged stronger. She had learned trust, courage, and the power of connection. And now she was ready for whatever came next. As they descended the tower together, a gentle breeze swept through the mansion, carrying with it the scent of rain-soaked earth and fresh beginnings. The corridors, once ominous, now seemed welcoming. The whispers were gone, replaced by the quiet hum of life and energy, as if the mansion itself had acknowledged their courage and accepted their presence. Alina felt a hand on her shoulder, warm and grounding. "Stay," Vincenzo said softly. "You do not have to go back. You are free to choose. Freedom." The word echoed in her mind, but it was different now. She was no longer a helpless traveler caught in a storm. She had agency, power, and understanding. And her heart had chosen. She looked into Vincenzo's storm-colored eyes, seeing the man who had haunted her nights and intrigued her days. She saw not a captor, not a shadowed ruler, but a man capable of love, loyalty, and transformation. "I choose to stay," she said, her voice steady and certain. "Not because I have to, but because I want to." Vincenzo's expression softened, and for the first time, his usual aura of control and dominance gave way to something tender, vulnerable, and real. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of their shared choice, their shared journey. Together they walked through the mansion, side by side, their hands intertwined. The darkness that had once threatened to overwhelm them had been confronted and transformed, leaving room for trust, connection, and the beginning of something profound. As they reached the main hall, Vincenzo paused and looked toward the horizon, where the first hints of a new day glimmered. "The world outside will always hold challenges," he said, his voice calm, certain. "But within these walls, with each other, we have found strength." Alina smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by hope and anticipation. "Then we face it together," she said, echoing his words, a promise and a declaration. The mansion stood around them, grand, alive, and eternally mysterious. But now it was also a place of beginnings, of courage tested and hearts transformed. And as Alina and Vincenzo stood side by side, looking toward a future both uncertain and full of possibility, they knew one truth above all. Some doors, once opened, lead not to captivity, but to freedom and connection, even in the shadows.